Thank him for allowing this debate to take place tonight. Is it reasonable to believe that God exists? Yes. Yes, it is. I'm going to argue tonight that not only is it reasonable to believe that God exists, but that denying belief in God reduces one's worldview to absurdity. Well, why is it reasonable to believe that God exists? Quite simply, because it's true that he exists. Here's my argument. Premise 1, it's reasonable to believe that which is true. Premise 2, it's true that God exists. Conclusion, therefore, it's reasonable to believe that God exists. Matt is going to want me to show that it's true that God exists. I mean, I've watched a lot of video with Matt recently, and truth is very important to him.
I care about what's actually true.
My only concern is, or my primary concern is whether or not it believes truth.
I actually give a shit about whether or not something's true. Truth is the thing that I value most.
He wants to believe as many true things and as few false things as possible. Well, so do I. And guess what? I say it's true that God exists. Therefore, it is true that God exists. My argument is sound and the debate is over. How does that work for you, Matt?
Saying something doesn't make it true.
Oh. Saying something doesn't make it true. Well, how's this? It's true for me that God exists. Therefore, it's true that God exists.
I'm talking about the idea that something could be true because it's true for you. That's the thing that I'm actually rejecting.
Just because it's true for me doesn't mean it's true. Oh well. I strongly feel it's true that God exists. Therefore, God exists.
Just because you feel it strongly doesn't mean that it's true.
Oh man. Not because I said it, not because it's true for me, not because I feel it, not because others believe it, not because the belief is sincere, or because its denial is frowned upon. Come on. Help me out here, Matt.
When we're talking about truth and the fact that truth has to exist independent of our knowledge of it, yes, that's true.
Oh, okay. Now we're getting somewhere. Truth exists independent of our knowledge of it. Perhaps at this point, a definition of truth would be in order. How does Matt define truth?
Truth is that which comports with reality.
Truth is that which comports with reality. Great. Wait a minute. Whose view of reality? In my view of reality, God exists. And I really, really believe that my view of reality is the right view. Does that make it true?
You can believe that you can believe that naked pixies whisper in your ear and clean out your sink at night if you want to. But it has no bearing at all on the objective reality that we actually have to deal with.
Oh, okay, I get it. Objective reality. What's really real. Not just because I believe it. Truth must be that which corresponds to objective reality. Well, that makes sense, actually. Just because somebody high on drugs believes that there's snakes on the bed doesn't mean that there's actually snakes on the bed. In order to know if something's true, our internal beliefs must match what's actually true, what's actually real.
I want my internal model of reality to match the actual reality I live in as best as possible.
Of course he does. It has to match actual, objective, ultimate reality to be true. Matt cares about truth, so he must care about ultimate reality, right?
I don't care whether this is the ultimate reality.
Wait, what? Matt doesn't care if this is the ultimate reality? Surely that was a slip of the tongue. Surely Matt must care a little bit about what's ultimately real.
Possibilities and reality. I don't care. Sorry, I just really, really, really don't care.
He really, really, really doesn't care. Now, folks, that's a problem. Truth is that which is ultimately real, and Matt doesn't care what's ultimately real. Why is that?
My position is that, yes, we cannot distinguish whether or not, I can't distinguish whether the reality I experience is an ultimate reality. I could be in a matrix or a brain of ad or pick any thought experiment you want.
Matt doesn't care what's ultimately real because he can't know what's ultimately real. You heard it. He could be a brain in a vat. According to Matt's worldview, he can only know that which is in his own brain. See, I'd even argue that point. But surely that would be absurd. I mean, isn't that solipsism? Solipsism. A theory and philosophy that your own existence is the only thing that is real or that can be known. Well, that's nuts, right? I mean, anybody who claims to be a solipsist deserves to be mocked, right?
And because I'm a solipsist, because I'm in certain...
You're a solipsist?
Trapped like most...
Mocked, and hung up on. Good job, Matt. I mean, that's crazy. I mean, if that were the case, not only could you not know ultimate reality, you'd have no basis for trusting the reality that you think you're experiencing. I mean, you might think that you're in a room with blue walls when you're a brain in a vat in a room with orange walls. You see, I have watched a lot of Matt's videos, and he hangs up on a lot of people. Now, why would Matt hang up on the solipsist? Why would he hang up on the solipsist, I wonder?
We cannot ever solve the problem of hard solipsism, pretending that I'm claiming to be able to defeat hard solipsism. I have no solution to that.
Matt has no solution for solipsism. In fact, according to Matt's worldview, he must be a solipsist. But rather than admit it, he mocks somebody claiming solipsism. Of course, Matt would never admit to being a solipsist. Or would he?
Obviously, I'm not a solipsist, you're not a solipsist, but in some possible world,
Actually, I kind of
there actually is.
Did you catch that? It's kind of soft. I enhanced the audio for you.
Obviously, I'm not a solipsist, you're not a solipsist, but in some possible world,
Actually, I kind of
there actually is.
Actually, he kind of is a solipsist. Of course he is. Matt can't know anything outside his own brain. And I have to show that it's true that God exists. He can't know anything outside his own brain, and he's going to argue that it's unreasonable to believe in God? My friends, this debate isn't over. It never started. Matt's worldview isn't down for the count. It's dead. It just doesn't have the courtesy to lie down.
When Matt's worldview is laying there as a solipsist and everybody's going, well, that's okay, he can still debate. How do you figure that?
I mean, my opinion is that he explained himself, that he mentioned that he can't disprove ultimately to Sai's satisfaction.
What I
But
encourage people to do is watch this over and over again. Not that you're going to be convinced of the truth of it. See, that's one thing that other people say is that, are you up here to convince people? I can't convince even one person. I'm up here to speak the truth in the hope that the Holy Spirit converts them. Because I can't convert anybody. So I just spoke the truth. I just showed that Matt can't make sense of the truth. And he's very inconsistent in his argumentation. He'll make knowledge claims, he'll make truth claims, then you ask him, you press him on, well, I don't believe they're, I don't claim them to be true or that I know them, I just believe them. Of course, that itself is a truth and knowledge claim. It's absurdity. And that's what I said. That's what the option is today, Jesus Christ or absurdity. But people choose absurdity because they love their sin.
of a philosophy buff, and I like thinking about knowledge and certainty and other topics that might arise tonight. But when it comes to propositional claims in general, and the topic of this debate specifically, knowledge and certainty are completely irrelevant. We don't wait until we have knowledge to act, and we don't wait until we have absolute certainty to act. We act in accordance with our beliefs, and we recognize that because our beliefs inform our actions and that our actions have consequences, it's in our best interest to believe as many true things and as few false things as possible.
I mean, you can't know anything if you can't know what's objectively real, and that's what I was exposing. He can't make sense of the very concept of reason, and he's going to argue that it's not reasonable to believe that God exists. It's absurd.
But the Bible could be wrong.
Based on what standard?
Yeah, how do you know?
See, when you say it could be wrong, you're appealing to
No,
a
no,
standard
no.
that you can't account for.
I don't mean
What
wrong.
is wrong in your world?
I don't mean wrong ethically.
No, wrong at all. The very concept of right and wrong does not make
Inaccurate.
sense to evolve pond scum.
Inaccurate.
What is inaccuracy to evolve pond scum?
Hey, David, could you be wrong?
I see why people get frustrated talking about you.
That's all we heard. 10 minutes from somebody who can't know that he's not a brain and a fat. Debates presuppose truth. Matt says truth is that which corresponds to reality. Matt admits he can't know what's real. Everything he says so far is borrowing from my worldview. You can't know anything to be true unless you start with God. Everyone here knows that God exists. Why don't I present evidence? Why don't I present evidence? Where do you hear evidence out in the world? In the court of law. Who do you present evidence to in court? The judge. When you come up to me and say you don't believe in God, and I present you with evidence, I'm saying that you're the judge. You're not the judge. God is the judge. All of you know that he exists. When you come to a debate, you want to hear whether or not what we're arguing is true. You want to know if it's true that God exists. Well, tonight I'm going to wait to see if Matt ever tells me how he can know anything to be true according to his worldview. Matt agrees that his view on logic is a result of the chemical reaction in his brain. I mean, would you come here today and listen to a debate? It was a bottle of Dr. Pepper arguing against a bottle of Mountain Dew. You shake them up and you open them and they start to fizz. Which of those fizzes would be true? Neither. It's just fizz. If Matt's worldview is true, then our brains are just evolved meat machines. And our thoughts are the byproduct of the chemical reactions in our evolved brains. It's brain barf. He would be fizzing atheistically, I'm fizzing theistically. And you want to know which one of those is true. You can't get truth from that. You see, Matt's view on logical absolutes, as far as he knows, could be fed to him from a computer when he's a brain in a vat. See, there's not really much more I have to say about that. Yeah, you can laugh all you want. No, I'll keep going. I'll just preach to you.
There are many other ways to express this problem. How do you know you're not imagining a world while locked up in an asylum? And it relates to many other philosophical problems, some of which we're likely to address. The general consensus among philosophers seems to be that there's no current solution to this problem, and that it may be the case that a solution simply isn't possible. I think there are some good arguments against solipsism, but I'll concede, as do most philosophers, that there appears to be no ultimate absolute solution, but I'm stuck dealing with the reality I experience until someone offers me a way out.
See, solipsism is the belief that nothing can be known outside of one's own mind. And see, Matt refuted that with everything he said. Here's the problem. I mean, you can't know anything if you can't know what's objectively real, and that's what I was exposing.
My point to you, Sai, is you intentionally go back to the Bible every time.
Of course.
But
That's our authority.
and, okay,
you go to your reasoning every time.
I
That's
do go to
your
reasoning every time.
That's
Thank
your
you.
authority.
So I'm not an evidentialist. I don't give people evidences to prove that God exists. I expose the fact that they know that God exists. I'm what you would call a presuppositionalist. See, we all get the same evidence, but we examine the evidence according to what we already believe. If you put a fossil right here, the unbeliever will say, oh, millions of years. The creationists will say, well, that shows Noah's flood. We examine the evidence and we come to different conclusions based on what we already believe. So I don't examine the evidence. It makes no sense. I examine the beliefs we take to the evidence. And I say that without God, you can't make sense of examining evidence. First, I'd like to start off with this question for you, Matt. When you said this,
From the standpoint of objective reality, the belief that there is a God is a delusion.
do you still believe that?
Yes.
How do you know anything to be objectively real?
How do I know it? What do you mean by no?
What do I mean by no? Welcome to atheism. How do you know anything to be objectively real when you've admitted you could be a brain in a vat?
What do you mean by no? Do you mean how am I aware of?
Right.
or-
How are you aware of objective reality?
I'm aware of reality through my senses.
But that's not what I asked you. I asked you how you're aware of what is objectively real, not what you perceive to be real.
So when I use the term objectively in this context, I'm using it in the sense of not subjective or not contingent upon any one mind within the scope of reality. For example, I'm convinced that I'm in a room with other people right now, and if they agree with me that I'm in a room with them, then we can then work together to investigate reality.
Right. But the fact is, you've admitted you could be a brain in a vat.
I haven't admitted that I can be. I haven't
You could
admitted
be.
that I cannot prove that I'm not.
That's right. So therefore, it follows that you could be.
It doesn't follow that you could be.
I could be in a matrix or a brain in a vat or pick any thought experiment you want.
Okay, so you trust your senses and reasoning in order to determine what is real in your reality. Right?
Yes.
On what basis do you trust your senses and reasoning?
On their continued reliability at producing effective results.
Okay, now when you... No, see, now the thing is...
Hang on, let him ask questions.
The thing that... It never ceases to amaze me that you don't see the folly of that answer. Because the thing is, he says on their continued reliability. How does Matt know whether they've been reliable in the past? How does Matt know they're reliable now? How does Matt know that they're going to be reliable? You know why? Because he uses them to prove it. It's a vicious circle. If your reasoning was not valid, how could you know it?
I don't know.
Matt admitted that he can't know what's real. Therefore, he can't know what's true. Therefore, he can't know what's reasonable. Therefore, he has no business being at the debate. How about this? Why don't you tell me one thing you know?
Why?
Because that's my question, sir.
Well, what do you mean by no?
Justified true belief.
I'm not claiming to know.
Anything.
I don't just think or believe that there's value in debating. I know there's value in it.
Like the thing is, when I ask you how do you know something, if you don't answer that to anybody else, a cop comes up to you, and they ask how you know something, you don't say, what do you mean by no, officer? I mean, you only have to play these philosophical mumbo-jumbo games with a Christian to avoid the God that all of you know exists. Sure, you can laugh if you want, but it's absurd. It's absurd.
Owns the next 10 minutes of the conversation.
So you're not an evidentialist anymore, even though once upon a time you were.
I would say that I'm the ultimate evidentialist. I would say all evidence points to the existence of God. A presuppositionalist is the ultimate evidentialist. I don't say special evidences point to God. I say that you can't make sense of any evidence unless you start with God.
But you don't present evidence in any defense of God anymore because...
I present evidence when I share my faith. I go for a walk, I look up at the stars, and I actually laugh that there's people out there who look at the sky and deny that God exists. I present evidence when I share my faith. But when somebody says you're nuts for what you believe, then I don't put them in the judge's seat and God on trial.
Okay.
Is logic absolute?
Do I believe that logic is
No,
absolute?
I'm asking you, is logic absolute?
Define logic. Because are you talking about the logical absolutes that we talked about, the laws of identity, non-contradiction?
Yes. Are they absolute?
I believe that they're absolute.
So are they absolute? That's my question.
Are you asking me if I'm absolutely certain that they're absolute?
I'm asking you if they are absolute.
You're asking me if they're absolute.
Right.
I don't know.
So do they necessarily apply to this debate?
Yes.
Based on what standard?
I believe that they apply to this debate.
They
is what I'm
necessarily,
saying.
or do you believe it, or do they necessarily apply to this debate?
Well, I can't, since I can't say for absolute certain that they're there, or that I cannot, see, this is the problem with when you start going down these where you're smuggling in absolute certainty without actually saying it. Because...
Are you absolutely certain of that?
No. Because I've already conceded at the beginning that I'm not saying I'm absolutely certain about anything.
Are you absolutely certain that you're not absolutely certain about anything?
No, I'm maximally certain.
Maximally certain.
Which is what I started off with.
I was arguing from a position of truth, from a position of rationality, from a position of logic. Matt admits that he was arguing from a position of arbitrary beliefs. And he says, I'm the one who didn't come to debate.
So if you and I are sitting here, and evidently we can't agree, but if we could agree that we are in a shared reality, then reality are those things that we agree upon, that we can demonstrate reliably. But at a core level, because we can't demonstrate that we're not a brain in a vat, the reality is the reality I experience. I just happen to be convinced and believe, for what I think are good reasons, that I'm sharing it with all these other people.
Right, but you have no basis for knowing that, though.
I didn't say I knew it, did I? I don't even know what you mean by know it.
That's the absurdity of this. It's absolutely absurd to engage with somebody who wants to have a debate about truth, and you ask them why I know something to be true, and he says, I don't claim to know anything to be true. It's absurd.
We say, hey, here's our basis, revelation from God. Here's our basis, revelation from God. What's your basis for certainty?
About anything.
Well, I mean, there are several things that I think, that I believe, like Matt was saying. I think he did a very good job of explaining things he believes, but that he could be wrong about. And I'm fine with that.
So
But-
what's your basis for certainty?
Well, here's the
About
problem.
anything.
I'm not claiming to have extraterrestrial knowledge.
Right. What's your basis?
What's
So
your
I'm not-
basis for certainty?
Right. About anything.
What do you mean by that?
How do you know
any-
anything?
How do you know
What is
anything to be
certainty?
true?
See, that's the song and dance we get all the time.
Certainty.
My
All of you
song and
know.
dance, are
That's
you
right.
kidding me?
How do you know
Okay,
anything?
step up to the mic. What's
See,
your name?
Let's go to the mic because I don't want to answer the question.
It doesn't make any sense, guys.
Because you can't answer
No,
the
because
question.
you are
You
claiming to
people know
magic.
it.
Yeah.
You might not see it tonight.
You're claiming to magic.
Listen to this over
That's
and
what I'm
over
saying.
again,
I'm
and
not
listen to
claiming-
him avoid the question.
We're claiming
'cause you all
revelation
know
from
it.
God.
Why don't they want to debate you again?
Well, you want my reason or their reason?
Now, the problem here is a big disconnect, and it's the reason why you find it frustrating and why I find it frustrating.
I'm not frustrated, I expect it.
Sorry. It's the reason, see, I couldn't have predicted that. Because everybody else is frustrated.
I'm not frustrated.
And the reason, it must be so comfortable to just not have that sort of frustration.
The reason he doesn't want to debate me again is because he knows how it went. He knows how his worldview fared in this debate. He doesn't want that to happen again. And I still would be happy to have a free, open exchange with Matt. He won't do it. He came up with some ridiculous reason never to engage me again.
It doesn't matter to me, but we did, and I'm glad we did. And mostly I enjoyed it.
This is actually for both of you, but I'd like Matt to answer first. What's the difference between saying something is and saying I know something is?
Like I said during the rebuttal, that to know or knowledge may in fact be an entirely useless label because it is, so it's still an open question in philosophy. We're still trying to figure out exactly what knowledge is, and quite frankly, I think we're chasing something that we may not have any reason to chase. That maybe belief and rationally justified belief is all we could ever hope for.
You know, I didn't travel so many thousands of miles to go there and to hear what Matt believes. That's why it wasn't a debate. He was giving his faith statement. Well, when Matt says something is the case, what he's really saying is I know it's the case. But the thing is, he's going to want to say, I believe it's the case. Well, do me a favor, Matt. In the future, instead of saying something is the case, be consistent with your worldview and just say you believe it's the case.
How about I say what I want?
Okay, you can say what you want, but the thing is, the reason that you do that is because when I challenge, when you say something is the case, I say, do you know it? No, I just believe it. But you're saying it as though you know it, and that's the problem.
You just said that when I say something is the case, I'm saying I know it, and I just got done saying that when I say something is the case, I'm not saying
Right,
I
but
know
the thing
it.
is, you ask
So
anybody.
you know more about what's going on in my head than I do.
Well, I'm saying that
Is that right?
if you did a survey of somebody who says, well, this
So
is
are you
the
calling
case.
me a liar?
I'm saying, if you're saying that this is the case,
I
and
don't
you ask the
care about
person,
the survey. You said what I meant.
hang on a second.
You said that
right.
I meant something.
That's
Are you
right.
calling me a liar?
Yes.
Okay. I don't just think or believe that there's value in debating. I know there's value in it.
Who was that? I think that was Matt. He doesn't think or believe it. He knows it. Well, you judge for yourself whether Matt was lying or not.
What's your name and where are you from?
My name is